Over the last couple of centuries, medical science has come a long way. Thanks to modern medicine, Karen cannot vaccinate her kids and still have them live to the age of 5 before they die. In today's world, getting a cold or a fever isn't that big of a deal. If anything, it just means you get a day off from work. But it wasn't always like this. In the past, we didn't know much about diseases, let alone how to cure them. Plus, a lot of people around the world, especially in Europe, thought that having one bath every year or so was good enough. Combine that with the fact that plumbing hadn't been invented yet, and everyone was basically throwing their poop out of windows, and you've basically got a 5-star hotel for bacteria. So with everyone around them dying, people back then started coming up with different ways to cure these diseases. Unfortunately, since they knew absolutely nothing about how the body works, these cures were about as effective as a get-well-soon card if the card was filled with razor blades and gave you HIV. Unsurprisingly, most people who tried these cures just ended up dying. But at least now, hundreds of years later, I can make fun of them for YouTube content. So without further ado, here are some of the best cures that people in the past had. And by best, I mean the ones that probably killed the patient before the disease. Have you ever had a headache so bad that you'd do anything to get rid of it? Normally you'd just wait it out or take an aspirin, but unfortunately those hadn't been invented yet in the 16th century, so people did the next best thing and ate some human skulls instead. Back then, human bodies were in very high supply, probably because of all those diseases and executions that were going on, so we had to do something with them. I mean, we can't let these perfectly good medical supplies go to waste. Also, people were very desperate for new cures for diseases because everyone around them was dying and they didn't want to be next, so people decided to fight fire with fire. If you had some pain in your head, you just gotta eat more head. If you got a stomachache, you just rub some dead person's stomach fat all over your body. And if that wasn't enough, you could also head down to your daily execution and collect some fresh blood from the dead criminal to cure any blood disease you might have. Who needs chemotherapy when you can cure your leukemia with fresh blood? For about a century, almost every body part was being used to treat diseases. For a while, doctors followed the "if you have a blood disease, you drink blood" rule, but after a while, they saw the money involved and just started selling whatever they could. One scientist said that the cure for blindness was to take dried up fecal matter and blow it into a patient's eyes, which is a sentence I'd never thought I'd say, but here we are. Even the King of England at the time was using powdered human skull and alcohol to cure whatever disease he had. It unfortunately didn't work, but at least he got drunk before he died. Being a doctor back then was probably the easiest thing ever. You just tell your patients to eat whatever you find in your trash can. If they survive, great, and if they don't, they'll be too dead to complain. Eventually, in the 17th century, people in Europe decided that eating people wasn't exactly the best way to stay healthy and eventually stopped doing it, but not before many people made loads of money telling people to eat their neighbors. Another one of these cures is called bloodletting, and as the name probably tells you, it involves cutting yourself open and letting some blood drain out, all in the name of staying healthy. In ancient Greece, doctors thought that a human's health depended on 4 liquids: blood, mucus, yellow bile, and black bile, and if any of these were too low or too high, the patient would get sick. These 4 liquids were called the 4 humors, but I don't think someone having their blood drained out would see the humor in it. This practice actually lasted for more than 2000 years, which is surprising considering it's as effective as using a band-aid on a cancer patient. So if you lived in the 1500s and someone had to take blood from you, who would it be? Vote now in the comments, and you're all wrong, because it was actually barbers who were draining your blood. Yes, the ones that cut your hair are also now cutting your skin, probably with the same tools. People then believed that the more blood you remove, the healthier you'll become. So most bloodletting sessions ended up when the patient literally fainted. Is he gonna be okay? Oh, don't worry, he's completely healthy. I removed all his blood. Using leeches to suck out the blood was also very popular back then. You might think that any self-respecting human being would stay as far away as possible from something that looked like this, but people back then were covering themselves in leeches to get their blood out. According to doctors at the time, bloodletting could cure basically any disease in the world. Whether you have a small cold or stage 5 cancer, all you have to do is lose some blood. But as it turns out, ancient Greek doctors weren't exactly experts on the human body, considering they tasted their patients' pee every day to cure them. If you were lucky, bloodletting would just make you feel a bit tired, but for most people, it was a one-way trip to 6 feet under. One of the most famous deaths from bloodletting is George Washington. Poor old Georgie spent a bit too long outside in the snow and got a sore throat. He could have just waited for it to go away, but instead he told his doctor to drain some of his blood. What could possibly go wrong? Well, the doctor, not wanting to disappoint the president, ended up draining 75% of George's blood in his body, which could be a bad idea considering losing 40% of your blood is enough to kill you. Unsurprisingly, George Washington died that day, all because he stayed out in the cold and because his doctor was an idiot. One more ancient cure which dates back all the way to the Stone Ages is the classic trepanning, or in other words, drilling your skull open with whatever was around. In the Stone Ages, that was just any rock on the ground, but as time progressed, we moved on to better tools like old rusty knives. You might think all these skulls with holes were just attacked by some animal or something, but unless there was an animal that was carving out skull circles every time it killed someone, these holes were man-made. There are a lot of theories as to why humans suddenly decided to cut their head open, and the most common one says that humans at the time believed that headaches were caused by demons trapped inside someone's head, and drilling a hole helped them escape. To be fair, these holes were actually quite well made and most people survived the operation without anything bad happening. Granted, you still have a headache, but at least it doesn't kill you. This procedure was so popular that 5 to 10% of all the skulls from the Stone Ages have been trepanned, and they've been found all over the world. We stopped using this practice when we realized that you could just take a pill for your headaches and didn't really need a skull fracture. So yeah, those are some of the cures from the past that probably did more harm than good. Please don't try any of these at home because there's a high chance that you'll probably die, and if you do, you won't give me views anymore. I guess the moral of this video is, if someone comes up to you and says they've got a new cure, you should probably ask for an ingredients list first.